We are live on the Home Alone Minute. Today we're going to be talking about minute 44. Sonny, what have you got for us?
Well, we've got a young boy running away from a van. You're going to want to seek an alternate route, Chopper Dan.
Love it. So we're going to do one that's been shooting up the charts this week. This is Joe Pesci with Whistling Dixie.
I like that. We should. We're starting every episode with
the morning zoo.
Yeah, we should consider that format.
It's been considered.
Did you ever have?
You'll just have to wait until next week to know what the result of my consideration is.
I can't bated breath over here.
I'm vexed.
Did you ever consider radio DJ a viable career for you? Maybe you could do that. Maybe your music taste and personality and ability to, run some sort of radio board would all come together.
I did things adjacent to that on the production side, but I could never be a DJ for a few reasons. One, unless you're actually a program director, you don't have a ton of say over what that playlist is, and you just wear things out. Now, you could go and do your pirate radio station and play just what you want, and some friends of mine, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, there are probably 5 or 6 friends of mine who are various different
Ooh
stations.
la la. Look at you with your 5 or 6 friends.
But they're all people who have quote unquote radio stations or radio shows on like Mixcloud or something with 3 listens. And that's why it's not a viable career, because if you just play what you want to listen to, you might have a small swath of people who follow you as a tastemaker, but there's a reason top 40 is top 40. I just didn't want to be a cog in selling ad space, I guess is the short version.
You got principles. That's what I appreciate about you.
Not so much principles as I get bored with music quite easily. Unless it's Whistling Dixie by Joe Pesci, Daniel Stern. A la George's dad, I have a lot of issues with this minute.
All right.
Do you want to do a summary first?
Let's air some grievances. I mean, I think I summed it up, right? Like here, we're at minute 44. Kevin's already started walking away from the Wet Bandits. Marv says, let's see what house he goes into. And what follows is a Metal Gear Solid-esque mini game mission of let's follow the young boy without alarming him.
Metal Gear.
And then Kevin breaks off into a run, and he ends up at a church, and we see a nativity scene, and that's kind of where the minute ends, if I'm correct. Can you verify that?
I can.
Thank you. That's all I wanted.
We do, in fact, end on that nativity scene at, correct me if I'm wrong here, Trinity United Methodist Church?
That's right, in Wilmette, Illinois.
Not to be confused with the Willamette Valley in the Pacific Northwest, which is where some mediocre and some good wines are from. We won't drop any brands, though, because they are not sponsoring this episode. But you know who is?
Joe Pesci's Whistling Dixie.
You can just insert an ad there.
Oh, yeah. So far, we've rejected all of the advertisers that have come to us. So far, we've had to turn down all sponsorships because we just don't believe in the products.
Integrity.
Yeah, that's us.
You've got it. And you answer the emails.
If you find yourself in Wilmette on Tuesday nights, Jerod, you can go to the men's group at Trinity, Wilmette, 7:30 to 9 a.m. That sounds kind of nice, right?
That's a good pick-me-up in the morning.
Also on their website are some fun facts, which includes a nice little banner picture that just says, "We are the Home Alone Church," with a picture of the exterior of the church with a little arrow pointing to it with some text that says, "Look familiar," and a slightly low-res picture of Kevin in the classic Home Alone hands on cheek, mouth agape pose.
Do you think maybe they grabbed that before the Blu-ray release?
Maybe. They spell Macaulay Culkin's name incorrectly on their website too.
I wouldn't know because I have a Chrome extension that automatically corrects the spelling of his name.
You have to send that to me. So you never see.
I just can't be asked to see his name incorrectly spelled.
it's a slow working extension, right? You go to any website, it's an extra 15 seconds because it's scanning every word for Macaulay.
2 words, worth it.
You just don't want. I mean, you've got children in the house. You got to be careful. Okay. Let's air some grievances. The floor is yours.
In no particular order. Actually, saying I kind of have a grievance with that phrase because it's not true, because it's the order in which it comes to mind.
Okay. Let's say grievance A.
And this is not priority. It's just a trail of thought, a sequence, not an order, but a sequence. Grievance A. Why would he run? Maybe because a van is driving toward him. Why would an 8-year-old run if a van is driving toward them?
Yeah. Okay. So you reject the character's reasoning here.
Yeah, I go back and forth between if I am rejecting Harry's premise or if I'm rejecting the idea that Harry would say that. So, like, is it the character that I think is being absurd, or do I think that the character is unrealistic?
I like this because what you're supposing is that Harry and Marv know that they look criminalistic or threatening, that they have that awareness. Whereas the line, why would he run, suggests that they're maybe naive to that reality or overly confident that they can camouflage that element to them better than they actually can, thinking that the conversation they just had with Kevin assuaged any fears, right? Harry ends with Merry Christmas and gives him a smile as if this is all good. You got nothing to be worried about, kid. But in fact, he does, and he knows it. So they're troubled that for the first time in this movie, someone's onto them. In the D&D world, he just rolled a 1 in terms of deception.
Well, I think you nailed it. Those two types and or levels of awareness, that naive piece, they're incongruent.
Okay. It gives us this funny beat of them whistling and like looking down at the floor when Kevin looks back at him, though. That's a cartoonish response.
It is. And that is more a grievance with the West as opposed to this film.
I like it.
Because the most conspicuous thing you can do
is whistle.
Right. It's what you do to get someone's attention. It's what precedes catcalling.
They can't stop when he stops.
What do you mean?
Kevin starts walking away. They decide to trail him, but then Kevin stops and they stop too. You can't do that. This van's just going to stop in the middle of the road. Coincidentally, at the same time, Kevin stops.
Which one is more suspicious? They stop in the middle of the road and nothing happens, or they stop in the middle of the road and whistle.
Like they just decided to take a break from their trip. I mean, they've got to like drive past them, circle the block, kind of keep an eye on them from ahead, right?
Well, let's take that apart too. Going back to the very beginning, let's see what house he goes into.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? You can see like 12 houses from where they're parked in that driveway.
Mm-hmm. So
they don't need to even get into the road.
So just stay there for a little while.
Just chill.
Until he's almost out of sight, and then pull up a little.
Maybe pull up a little. Maybe when he rounds the corner of that street, if he does, then you can pull out of the driveway and then start going. But if they had waited a minute, he was in front of his house. I know that the majority of viewers are not going to catch the fact that the house is like
across the street from where they are.
It's where he stops in the street to turn around. Instead of him going to his right toward his home, he goes straight and runs away.
Which Kevin is smart enough to do.
Right. So if they had done way less, which is just, let's see what house he goes into. Not, let's follow him mere feet behind him and see what house he goes into. It's just, let's see. Like, they're not in a thicket. There's no
a thicket.
Line of sight to any house is pretty easy. You're not going to lose him in traffic.
Well, and maybe to the credit of the Wet Bandits, maybe they did feel an obligation to keep moving because they were moving. They were pulling out of that driveway when they got stopped by Kevin. So would it not be suspicious for them to just stay at the foot of the driveway for a little while?
Again, it's all relative. Which is more suspicious?
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, those people just stopped at the end of that driveway versus, hey, there's some people following me who stopped and are now whistling.
I mean, I've said it before, but they're the perfect level of bumbling where we're still happy to see them fail, but we know Kevin's going to be okay. These guys aren't too dangerous. They're bad guys, but they're just the right amount of cartoon buffoon. Your Beagle Boys that we know that Kevin, our Huey, Dewey, and or Louie is going to be okay.
So in sharp contrast to Grievances, let's give some props to Macaulay, the actor. Because to your point about this scene being full of great beats, one of which I think is the whistling bit, you're right. Because if I suspend disbelief, I think that's perfect. But what's also perfect is his pacing, his continuation of, I think, very good acting in this scene just prior, where he's nearly been hit by the van, kind of stumbling away.
And then the building suspicion and fear that you can just see on his face. He doesn't say anything.
He has 0 lines in this minute.
The music's
but
doing...
he says a lot.
Yeah, the music's doing some work for us. But there's even like one...
Shout out J-Dubs.
Yep. There's even one pretty long, silent beat of this minute that it's almost like uncomfortably long and silent of that growing suspicion where he stops and the music stops with him. And then he ambles along a little bit more and the music picks back up. We get to sit in his discomfort. And you're right, like he's saying so much with his face there. I recently revisited a good chunk of the DVD's audio commentary of Home Alone with Chris Columbus and Macaulay Culkin. And multiple times, Chris Columbus praises him for being such a fine actor. The presence that he has and the talents that he had as an actor just were so far beyond what he saw from other child actors auditioning that, we got something special here.
In the spirit of
Christmas,
I think we should watch Home Alone. Supplemental materials.
Well, I want to make sure we don't get too far off the rails of item 1 of Jerod's airing of grievances. We've got grievance A. Are we ready for grievance number 2?
Oh, I kind of thought we went through A, 2, and D.
Gotcha. We covered all the bases.
Yeah, that's why I was pivoting into how great is he.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure we didn't miss any bones that needed picking.
No, perfectly happy with the church bells.
They're so dramatic. This cut to, is this a steeple? Does this count as a steeple?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I'll call this a steeple every day.
I just didn't know the architectural nomenclature. Sometimes those parts of a church show up pretty often on crossword puzzles.
To be clear, I didn't say this was a steeple. I said I would call this a steeple. This is where my truth...
Yes, it's 2024. We get to create our own reality.
You can bring me so much evidence that this is not a steeple.
I've shown you the diagrams. I've bought you a copy of
Steeples Monthly.
Church Parts, a compendium of...
Church Parts seems like a reverse porn parody of Howard Stern's Private Parts. It's like a pendulum swing where people, instead of doing porn parodies, they do even more conservative versions of films.
It's all the places where grown-ups can touch you.
So it's the palm. Oh, my church parts. Is this not going in your notebook? Because church parts needs to be something. It's not a Home Alone song, but
yeah,
it's a line in
Church Parts. The swelling music when it cuts to those, to what we are calling a church steeple. It's so jarring. It's so dramatic. It communicates what I don't think it intends. I don't think it intends what it's communicating.
Maybe not to you. So what is it communicating to you?
Churches are scary.
Let's unpack that.
There's a lot here. We would need like, you know, a Pete Holmes level of podcast length.
For the Sunny God Minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you not think that this is the soundtrack to the mystery?
Uh
That's my, that's what Pete Holmes would say, I think.
the mystery that is God,
Do you know him by another name?
Yahweh. The
Allah.
it just sounded like Phil Hartman to me, and I really appreciated it.
How are these cookies?
Okay. The threat of this minute.
is God.
No, it's not. It's the Wet Bandits. It's this creepy van.
No, but to you.
No, it's the van.
No, but to you, the threat of this minute is God because of the music. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that what Kevin is afraid of in this moment, and what we as the audience are also therefore scared of, is the Wet Bandits. So to cut to a church steeple and swell up that music, you know better than I do. This is a minor key, right?
You're correct.
Okay. To heighten that musically, when you're cutting away from the Wet Bandits to something that offers sanctuary, literally, for Kevin, is a weird choice. This church doesn't look scary, does it?
Without working too far ahead, I don't think he finds sanctuary inside of this building.
No.
So we're thinking about the outside of this building. And I also think that the spiritual realm isn't just for the good. It's good and evil. And I feel like this is elevating the battle of good and evil from the cartoonish context we just saw to a higher realm.
Okay. So we see a church and we associate it with God, Jesus, angels, goodness, the salvation of my soul. And what you are proposing is that by that nature, we are also associating it with demons and evil and the battle for my soul.
There's not one without the other.
Okay, fine. I still don't see it that way. I think it's a slight misstep in an otherwise perfect film.
I think you should frame this as a grievance.
I'm calling it Grievance 2.
I think you should submit that grievance formally by way of a very grievance mail.
Okay.
Which we've shortened to very Gmail.
Is the G stands for grievance?
Well, that's what he's saying. When he's looking at all these nice houses, he's like, ooh, very grievance.
Because he doesn't know what that word means. Because criminals are dumb.
Just to make sure I fully got it, the alternative you would have preferred that drove Grievance 2, would you have had it cut to something that's a bit more akin to the Simpsons opening?
Harps?
I ask because does that not seem maybe too cartoonish?
I would argue that the theme to The Simpsons is a pretty cartoonish musical number. I don't need angelic harps here. I just don't see how a church heightens the conflict. I don't see the drama intensifying from the addition of a church into this equation. If anything, it decreases my worry for Kevin.
I'll be curious to pay a bit more attention to the musical cues once we are inside this building, because I feel like there will be motifs associated with those contrasting spaces.
Well, contrasting indeed, because when we're inside this building, we're not actually inside this building.
Do tell us about the other church that, well...
I'm not getting into it yet because it's not...
Yeah, maybe don't tell us about that.
We don't mix minutes around here.
I hope they have a men's group.
Can I back up to last minute, because either I misspoke or Chris Columbus is remembering incorrectly, because when I revisited the audio commentary on the DVD and it gets to that part where Fuller gets squished by the chair, Chris Columbus says that they built like a soft foam chair, that they didn't play it backwards. Maybe this is my own Home Alone related Mandela effect, but I could have sworn that I learned that somewhere.
Was it on the internet?
Either that or like, one of those, like that Netflix movies that made us documentary.
Yeah.
Man, you think you know a movie. So I've decided to, in the style of a samurai who has drawn his sword but not drawn the blood of his enemies, I will be releasing myself from the duties of running this podcast, and there will be open auditions for someone who can get this stuff right.
So if you just send us a note at theartofseppuku@verygmail.com.
You'll get that? Is that how emails work? Like you can literally put anything in front and...
Not in front of anything, but in front of verygmail.com.
Yeah.
Until those mailboxes are allocated. So Sonny goes to you.
Yeah.
Everything else goes to me. But if I keep adding mailboxes, so let's say we have
Mandela effect at verygmail.com.
Right. Someone signs up for that. And when I say sign up, I mean asks me for that mailbox and I will give it to them.
Mm-hmm. Church parts at verygmail.com.
So then Sonny at Mandela effect at and church parts at will go to those things. And then everything left over will be to me. We call that a catch-all.
Okay.
So anything that is not addressed to something that has a mailbox already will just go to me.
That's, I don't know, exciting stuff. Can I tell you the story about trying to use my verygmail.com address over the weekend?
Please.
I was walking the child around our town square. We just left Hubbard Woods Pharmacy, stolen toothbrush in hand, and a
shoplifter.
We were greeted by a nonprofit solicitor, I guess. What do you call them, And it was like
canvasser, maybe?
Yeah. It was like No Kids Hungry or something like that. But she said the money was going for scholarships. And I didn't quite understand.
They're hungry for knowledge.
Yeah, no kid hungry for knowledge. They're thirsty for more books. But she was nice enough and friendly. And I was waiting to cross the street anyway. So I don't know if it was an intentional trick, but she was like, yeah, well, you can make a donation today. I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. She had like a little like name tag with a QR code on it. So I'm like, yeah, let me just scan the QR code. And she's like, well, actually, this QR code just takes you to like my paperwork saying that like I work for this company. Then she pulls out the iPad and starts like getting my information. And I don't want to do all that, So she asked for the email address. And I'm like, I've got an email address for her. So I tell her, Sonny at verygmail.com. And she's like, Sonny at gmail.com. And I just said, yeah. But it did shine some light on a potential flaw in what we maybe considered a great idea.
No.
I don't think anyone that I give that to will type it out correctly ever.
So a couple of things. One, I have given a few of those addresses out to people who have typed and sent them successfully.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay,
anecdote for anecdote, we are even.
Fair.
I don't know how to say this without sounding terrible, but the person you gave your email address to is not that savvy. I say that because in the scope of email addresses that exist, quite literally billions of them, 0 of them have multiple ats.
Sure. I'm just saying I'm 0 for 1.
Right. Percentage-wise, it seems bad. But I'm maybe 5 for 5 right now.
Ooh. You give it out to all your friends. There's one more thing I want to talk about before we go, because I think...
It's how you and I define friend differently.
Would you consider me friend?
I'd consider you a very G friend.
A very grievance friend?
I know what that word means.
What we're seeing here is some noticeable character progression in Kevin's bravery. Just minutes ago, just a few episodes before, he was terror-stricken by Old Man Marley. We saw him similarly cower in fear from a furnace. And there's a brief beat in this minute where Kevin recognizes that he's in peril and he just takes a deep breath and keeps walking. And it's a subtle but demonstrable way to indicate that he's growing as a character.
This podcast wouldn't be all that interesting if it was just me going, I know, right? To everything that you say. So I'll push back just a little bit and say, is his perception of Old Man Marley versus some bumbling bandits not a part of how he reacts? Does that not influence the way in which he responds?
It's part of it. Granted. Very, very granted, very G. But like we were saying earlier, there's a lot being unsaid here. And what Kevin's face communicates, what Macaulay Culkin's acting communicates is, I am scared, but I am in control of my actions here. And every other moment so far, when fear grips him, he loses that control. He screams and he runs away. It's an involuntary flight. And this is the first time we see him confront fear with calm. And we're on an upward trajectory because I believe the next time we see him scared is a later minute and we don't talk about it, but he handles it even better.
Is this not flight as well?
I'm talking about this one moment where he pauses and he takes a deep breath and he keeps on walking. He thinks before he makes a move, and it's what gets him to run away from his house and run down the street and run towards a church. He makes a strategic decision here instead of just screaming.
The I'm going to press on.
Yeah.
That thing. Okay.
Yeah. It's a good shot.
So good.
Very good.